to Watch is an intimate look into the lives of prominent and influential women leaders from around the world and the challenges they faced on their journey. It's the real story behind her title. Join us every week to hear more stories about women from around the world and in your own communities at womentowatch.net. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Women to Watch. I'm Sue Rocco. Thanks so much for being with me. Joining me in just a moment will be Willow Hill. And Willow is the Chief Creative Officer of Scout Lab, and she's also the co-founder. She has a great story about meeting the CMO of Starbucks, which was a jumpstart for her career in a creative agency. Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel where you'll find the latest installment from Dawn Zier talking about non-linear career paths. So now I'm very honored and excited to welcome to the show Willow Hill. Willow, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you. We spoke a long time ago. I didn't realize how long ago it was. So probably a lot of things have happened since we first met. Particularly with your company. So I'm excited to learn, all the latest and greatest with Scout Lab. But I first want to give our audience a glimpse into the little Willow growing up in Arizona, also Oregon. And, just talk a little bit about the community where you were born and a little bit about growing up with mom, a single mother, and your sister. I would say that's quite the girls' club.
Oh, it was the ultimate girls' club. I grew up in a home with my mom, who she was certainly young herself. She was 16 when she had me. And so I grew up with her and my aunts around, just a really kind of big, boisterous home with, family everywhere and my younger sister. It was really an interesting kind of upbringing in Flagstaff, Arizona, which was a college town. My mom put herself through college. She was incredibly resilient and just had a lot of grit. So I grew up really watching her with this kind of self-determination to create a different future from the life that I think she had really been given by her parents. So my entire childhood, I got to experience things like going to a college class and sitting at the back of the class or sitting in the hallway and waiting for her to get done with school, which is kind of a unique experience in itself, but it really taught me a lot about, who I could be and what the potential is in every circumstance, and really ultimately not letting circumstances define you or your future and what you end up being able to create. So my upbringing, while definitely challenging in some respects, had so many lessons for entrepreneurship that ultimately led me to being able to live this life as an entrepreneur in such a fluid and determined way, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah. Watching, I think, your mother work so hard, I'm sure was impactful for you. And I wonder, did you kind of make a conscious decision when you were younger? I'm going to work as hard and create my own life. Or did you find yourself making similar choices?
Yeah, I found myself really not seeing limits. I think that was the real beauty. It was, if you want something, you work to go get it. And I think there was this underlying work ethic and this belief that if you work hard enough, you can get to where you're going. And while I still believe that, I think there's also a new element that's layered in with my adult understanding that yes, you can work really hard and that will get you someplace and you can be determined. Within that, there are also layers of protection that we offer as a society that can help you get there. And as an example of that, looking back, I was able to have school free lunch, right? As a child, I was able to apply for federal aid. I worked really hard in college and got good grades. Yes, I had a few loans, but I ultimately had a full ride scholarship. But these things wouldn't necessarily have existed if we didn't have somewhat of a structure to help a family like mine get on a path where I could now be someone who is an adult that's been educated, that owns a business, that employs people. So yes, work hard, yes, be determined, and also as a society, really kind of stepping back, consider how important these resources are for people to mobilize out of whatever station they're in into this kind of world of abundance is really important to me.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what your Native American heritage means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And my Native American heritage has actually been, I would say, a really long journey of evolution for me. When I was a kid growing up in Arizona, we lived on the border of the Navajo reservation, and so what I found, um, getting up into first, second grade was that I was I experienced a lot more bullying around my identity than I had when I was younger. So being confronted with that, and understanding that, oh, here in this space as a child, being associating with my identity as a Native American child was looked down upon. Right, and it became something for me that was actually really tough, to hold as a truth. I actually, had an entire time period as a child where I started telling other kids and my teachers that I was Hawaiian. I learned about Hawaii in school. I thought it was so interesting. I was like, "Oh, it's Hawaiian Island, okay." But I did that right, I denied my identity. I
Mm.
ultimately really internalized that racism, and I lied in order to feel safe. And I very clearly remember one day coming home from school, and my mom and my sister, you can tell you when you come home from school and you're in trouble, you can tell. It's pretty obvious.
They're usually waiting at the table
I got
for you.
yeah, they're waiting at the table, exactly.
Yeah.
But my younger sister had heard me, and she felt really saddened. Why is my sister denying who we are? We're Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Cherokee. We're not Hawaiian. What's going on? Why are you denying us, denying me, your family, who we are? And a lot of that came back to, one, the bullying and racism I was experiencing as a young child and just trying to escape from it. And two, my father is Native American. And so the part of me that was, being bullied and experiencing this racism was also associated with someone who I didn't grow up with. I had a gap where there's a father figure and a lot of, anxiety around that. And so for me, associating with my Native American heritage and identity was always a real source of pain, and
Mm.
anguish for a long time. So it took me until I was probably about 11, to step into that and to release all of that experience. And now I've of course, evolved out of that and grown up and come to recognize just how beautiful that heritage is, how important and fundamental it is to who I am. I am a speaker on an Indigenous approach to creativity, support different organizations. It's ultimately really important to me, but it took me a long time to recognize that this part of my identity that this part of my lineage that I get through my father isn't necessarily something that I need a relationship with him to experience and to be proud of. I am who I am. My lineage and my ancestors are who they are, with or without a relationship with him. And so stepping into that ownership of who I am innately, has been a real emboldening and powerful experience for me of healing.
Wow. I love how you just described that because one of my favorite shows is Finding Your Roots. I don't know if you've ever watched that,
I'll have
but
to watch it. I haven't.
oh my gosh, every Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, they basically, dig deep into someone's heritage and find out about all the people that came before them. So you're right, it's not just about our parents, it's about so many generations before, and we have all these little bits and pieces of them. So that's a really interesting revelation that you kind of had from reflecting and thinking about it. And I understand that you reconnected with your dad about a year ago. And I just wonder if was that healing in any way? Did it give you more to kind of contemplate on? How did it help or not help?
Yeah, so it was the first time I saw him in decades, or spoke to him. And it was, first of all, it was a really big decision and a long road of healing and inner work, all the therapies before I got to that point of deciding that that was something that I wanted to do, was kind of reopen that door. And I think the number one takeaway is, whatever you think something's going to be, it's probably not. So just kind of like preparing yourself for something that big was really important for me going into it. And really not having expectation around it was really key. I think the biggest takeaway was ultimately that, again, I can have a deep connection to my heritage and to my roots, and I don't need a relationship with my biological parent in order to have that. And I think that ultimately that was actually really freeing for me and really beautiful. Um, because at the end of the day, even my healing work around that and my everything that I've worked through didn't necessarily result in my fairy tale ending, right? But it did teach me how resilient I am and how strong I am, and just how proud of myself I am for getting to where I am today in the absence of that.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. Um, I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the time prior to starting your company, and one of my favorite stories about you stalking the founder of Starbucks. It's a perfect example of your determination, going after what you want. Stay with us as we go into our break. You'll hear from our watch team of corporate partners, and we'll be back with Willow Hill.
As a female-led organization, you have to bring it every single day. We're a mashup of sort of right and left brain. So we're not just doing management consulting. We're not just doing creative services. We're not just producing an event, but we're bringing a comprehensive solution to our clients. And because of the way we approach it, we end up being bought into what it is that we're doing in a way that we truly have as much skin in the game as our clients do, whether it's bringing affordable internet to communities across the Caribbean, or it's helping Comcast with their Internet Essentials program, which is something we've been very proud to work on, or it's helping the NFL celebrate their centennial season by getting 1 million people to give at least 100 minutes to causes they care about, or helping the city of Philadelphia win the World Cup. So what's next for us? Well, we just hit just over 100 employees. I think we are at that tipping point, and I don't think there's anybody that does it better than we do. I'm Maggie Wilkinson, CEO of Athena Global Advisors, a company that is proudly based in Philadelphia.
Ladies, I'm Tiffany Kurgan, a financial professional with more than 25 years of experience serving successful women, families, and businesses. Here's the reality. You don't have to be the one managing your family's finances to take ownership of your future. But if you want true confidence about how everything is going to play out, you do have to take part in the process. That doesn't mean digging into the weeds of your finances when you don't have the time or desire. It means elevating your awareness of your own circumstances. It means having the bigger conversations so you're empowered when you need to be. Let's bring confidence to your family's future without overwhelming your time. Call my cell at 903-520-2709. That's 903-520-2709. Or visit Johnson Financial Group on our website, www.jfg.cc. Not .com, www.jfg.cc.
Hi, I'm Dawn Zier, CEO, Board Director, and Executive Mentor to Fortune 500 executives through my work at the Exco Group, a firm of experienced CEOs, board directors, and global business leaders who offer real-world experience to help organizations and senior executives grow. At some point early on in your life, you've likely been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Some of us know right away, but most of us don't know exactly what we want to do and change our mind multiple times throughout our lives, and that's perfectly okay. Take me, for example. When I look at my career, it's been a nonlinear journey and chock full of reinventions. First, I was an engineer, then I switched to marketing. I worked at a phone company, a bank, ran international for a media company, became a CEO of a health and wellness company, and now serve on multiple boards across various industries. Which brings me to one of the biggest lessons I've learned. For many successful people, their career is not a straight line. Let each chapter, each role inform the next, and don't be afraid to pivot. Also, remember that one often needs to make lateral moves rather than take a promotion to prepare for upward mobility. No experience is wasted, and every position you find yourself in is an opportunity to learn, to figure out what you want to do, and perhaps even more importantly, what you don't want to do, and also to define where your true passion lies. Please follow me on LinkedIn at Dawn Zier. And if you're a senior executive looking to grow in your career, visit excoleadership.com to learn more.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined this week by Willow Hill, and Willow is the Chief Creative Officer for Scout Lab and co-founder. And one of the stories that I love about your life, something that you did, I think it's really gutsy. You were determined to meet the CMO of Starbucks, Scott Bedbury. And so you pretty much stalked him. You can talk about what exactly that means. And ended up meeting him and then having him ask you to ghost write a book for him. So it did end up in a positive way. But talk a little bit about that. What happened?
Yeah, so I was actually really fortunate. So Scott was an incredible mentor of mine who, by way of university. So when I was in my senior year of college, I actually read a book called A New Brand World that he was the author of. And this book absolutely changed my life. It changed the way that I think about brand. It changed the way that I think about just structurally culture and how we approach things. It was the first time reading something about the brand world where I actually felt like someone really got it. Somebody understood just how important it is that brands are a part of building culture. So Scott was just a fascinating human. So he was a part of creating Just Do It for Nike early on, worked for Dan Wyden, worked for Phil Knight, and then went on to be the CMO of Starbucks, which is, as you mentioned. And then beyond that, started his own firm, wrote a book. So he's got, just an incredible pedigree of things that he's accomplished in his life, both in work and out of work. And after reading that book, I reached out. I was trying to see like, hey, is there any opportunity here for me to work with this person? So it was a really interesting process of not hearing back, continuing to reach out, and then getting really creative too with writing. I ended up actually like getting the opportunity to even meet his son, go through a professor. I basically pulled every potential pathway to see if I could get an opportunity to work with him that I could. It was really important for me at the time that I prioritized getting to learn from someone who was really emblematic or represented what I thought was missing in the world. And in this case, it was the power that brands have to change culture. That was something Scott really understood. And that he articulated so well. Obviously, Nike has gone on to change the world. Starbucks has gone on to change the world. And you can say what you want about those brands, whether you like them or not, but it is unequivocal that they've changed the way that we view coffee or coffee house culture or human connection around a third space, similar to Nike, the way that we as a culture identify, with the world of sport. So after I was finally able to kind of get a hold of him, it took quite a while. I would say I was like actually chasing that dream for over a year before I got a call from him, which originally he was asking me to help with his next book that he was writing. So that was like my absolute dream. I was a journalism student, but focused on advertising and creative. So I had originally gone over to start to work on that with him, and we got a little sidetrack and swooped into other major projects around branding for companies like Airbnb, which was another incredible opportunity that I would not have had without the opportunity to work with Scott. So I'm really grateful for that time. But ultimately, it was really about this kind of ability to kind of keep showing up and keep attempting to you know go in the window when there's no door, if you will.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Really similarly, I remember in high school, I wanted to get a job at this one specific restaurant, but I wasn't old enough. So I kept going every day. It was like leading up to the day that I was old enough to work there, I left my resume every single day. And the guy was like, "Oh my God, go away. Like this is too much." Finally,
She really wants to
calls
work
me in.
there.
He called me in for an interview. I remember I went in and he said, "You're hired. Do you know why?" And I said, "Yes, because I'm the best person for the job." He said, "No, because you won't go away."
Because you're bothering me.
It's bothering me.
Yeah, when you do something that stands out from the rest, doing something that no one else is doing, I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I think showing your dedication to something, and beyond that, just really getting creative and thinking differently about how you're going to approach something is really key. Because for young people right now applying for jobs, we live in this world where people are going on to LinkedIn and applying on a portal. And at the end of the day, you end up being, a paper and a digital stack that gets weeded out by AI before anybody gets to hear your story. So it's really important now more than ever, than it even was when I was doing this, to let people understand what it is that you actually care about, and then to start to put that out into the world. And I really do believe that that is the key to succeeding in whatever vertical you're going into.
And where would you say, just for in case there's a young woman listening, watching, um, where is the best place to do that? So, for instance, I think ideally, if you know someone and can get an introduction, that's always the best. But if you don't, how do you get your note message on LinkedIn, for example, to stand out?
So I do think LinkedIn is probably underutilized, or it's not utilized in the way that it could be. I think having an authentic voice is important, especially now with, so many people writing with tools like AI. It's more important than ever to actually write in your own voice and tell a real true story. Beyond that, I actually think a lot of young people discredit how much perspective that they have and how valuable that perspective can be to, different generations. So whether or not you are an expert in a field, your perspective on that, what you think, what your take on it is, how important it is to you, those things can be really powerful. So whether that's, writing a Substack or a blog, I think that or, building up content on LinkedIn around the topic that you're passionate about and that you're talking about can be a really powerful way in. And certainly I know that I've seen that in the different portfolios I've looked at, the people that apply to work at Scout Lab. I'm always looking at, are they thinking about these problems at a different level? Are they engaged? And so those are definitely tools that are free. They just take a little bit more time, and they take actually authentically engaging with something.
Yeah. Tell me, what was your greatest lesson from your time working on the Airbnb campaign?
Oof. There's so many. I would say the number one is that there's a lot of power in creating one voice that can speak many languages. There's more about us as human beings that are similar than are different. One thing you learn pretty quickly when you're trying to convince people that they can, sleep in a stranger's house.
When it wasn't a regular thing, right?
It
It's a
wasn't
new
a regular
concept.
thing, right? Yeah, so I
Yeah.
started working on Airbnb, kind of in a strategy and a creative capacity in 2012, and worked on it all the way through hyper growth, through the rebrand, through the relaunch globally. Had the opportunity to work in Europe, Asia, manage the global brand at such a young age, and one of the reasons that I was uniquely equipped to do that was because I had a sense of childlike wonder still, where I really genuinely believed that, a world that could open its doors could be a lot more open, and that this idea of creating a place where everyone can belong really did exist. And so having this kind of perspective where we can create something that is cross-border makes us, from a brand perspective, take an idea from, one market or one persona or one individual and think about things from more of a global perspective, which I just think is really powerful and not a lot of brands still do. But again, there's more similar about us as humans than is different. And I think that's important.
You said childlike wonder. Excuse me. I love that. Something about the way you said that. Do you still carry that with you in the work that you do today? Because I think that's so incredibly helpful in the creative space to be thinking that way, right?
I wouldn't be in the job I'm in without it. I don't think I could survive. Yeah, and it's one of my favorite parts about what I do. So at Scout Lab, we're a creative agency, but we're rooted in purpose, and we look at how are we building brands for the seventh generation? So if we're creating something, what is the impact going to be on future generations beyond just, what we're creating today, or what the kind of resonance is going to be with something tomorrow? And I think this idea of having that childlike wonder has an innate relationship with this idea of possibility, this idea of transformation, this belief that just because things are the way they are right now doesn't mean that they can't change, or it doesn't mean that they can't be another way. I do believe also that because I was fortunate enough to work on really building Airbnb at such a incredibly unique time in our, quite frankly, global history, we were able to create a new economy, right? It wasn't just about, staying at someone's home or home swapping. It was really about building a sharing economy. What does it mean when we can use the internet to connect with people? And how does that change everything about the way that we travel, the way that we experience cultures, the way that we experience the world? What does it open up from a financial opportunity perspective? Like, there's so much there. And so going through that curve of no one knows about us, no one thinks this is a good idea, to we're a household name. And when I say I'm going to Airbnb something, everybody knows what it means, is such a unique and special gift. I feel like that I've been able to experience that, to work on that, and to see that, yes, absolutely, if you have an idea, as crazy as it might be, it's absolutely possible if you're able to find a way to make sure that it's serving a greater good of humanity.
Yeah. Who had that idea first? I don't know.
So, I mean, I believe home sharing or home swapping has been around for a very long time. I think this idea of connecting people through digitally, through the internet, of creating this kind of community space was something, at least within Airbnb, the Airbnb founding, that Joe Gebbia was initially inspired by. He wanted to invite other designers, because the founders of Airbnb are initially designers, to invite other designers into their home and Airbnb it out, which was driven by a number of things, right? One is the cost of rent in San Francisco was so high. So of course, making extra cash to pay rent was important to them. But beyond that, getting to connect with other people within their community that were other designers was also really key. So to build trust, right? That there's some stickiness there in terms of identifying people who have the same interests or are kind of within the same world. So that was all an initial kind of inspiration from Joe. And then, of course, he and Brian and Nate together built the company. So getting to learn from those founders as well, I think, has been a gift just as much as my past experiences, to get a front row seat to watch them build this brand that's truly changed the course of how we connect and how we share cultural experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So Scout Lab, your company, it's your own, and now you're doing what you did, with and for Airbnb for multiple clients. First, tell me the name. Where did the name come from?
Yeah, Scout Lab. So we initially wanted to create a name that, again, had this kind of optimistic perspective. Again, that childlike wonder. So this idea of Scout, and then the lab piece came in because we wanted to have a little bit more of a scientific approach. So we're really rooted in research. We're measured. We're really thinking through things from kind of a quant and a qualitative perspective in the work that we do, which was really important. So that's where the lab piece comes from, right? There's an iterative process here. What we're doing is testing and learning at its core. So that's where Scout Lab, the kind of name, came from. And it was so funny naming it. My co-founder and I, we had I don't even remember how many names we had on the list, but I think it took us
It's
one day.
hard, isn't it? I mean, it's endless possibilities, and you have to come up with a name. And what are those words going to be? It's really hard.
Exactly. And I have two children, so I can say, of naming all of them, Scout Lab was right up there with the
Naming your
challenge of
children.
changing a name.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me the first client you landed? That must be incredibly exciting when you're an entrepreneur.
It was incredibly exciting and also quite honestly a little unexpected. When we started Scout Lab, first of all, it was, I would say, one of the most natural things I've ever done. I had met my co-founder through a friend who I had previously worked with at Airbnb. And when we met, we had so much creative chemistry. It was as if, it was as if we had, talked for years, but prior to that, and we had just met. And after literally one night, at the end of the night, we had talked and said, okay, we're going to do this. We're starting a company together, which in hindsight is absolutely insane. I'm lucky 8 years later that it worked out. I wouldn't recommend anyone else to do that, though, with someone that you absolutely don't know. But at the time I was 27, I didn't know any better. But I just remember her saying, okay, if we're going to do this, like, we're going to meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow at the coffee shop across the street from the restaurant we were at. And I was like, what? Okay.
Wait, what were you doing at that
serious.
time? At the time that you met her and you were talking about
I was like drinking wine. No, at the time, at the time, I had just moved to New York. I had left Airbnb over a year prior, but then was back consulting for them again and working towards figuring out what I wanted to do next. So I was in this kind of liminal space, consulting for Airbnb. And then when she said, we're going to meet tomorrow at 8 a.m., I was like, she's serious. Yes, we're doing that. We met at 8 a.m. the next day, and we haven't stopped since, which is just so powerful. So this kind of, that's where we started. I think that's like an important context because we had a very clear vision. Our first client that we ended up landing that was significant was Adidas, which is not a small client.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah, not a small client. But we ended up working for their innovation futures team, building out an entire really interesting strategy around innovation for them. And it was a really powerful moment to just remember that when you're starting out, it's so key to just believe in yourself. I mean, ultimately, right? Like it was definitely a big win right out the gate. But we just continued to build from there. And it's like I said, it's now been 8 years, and looking back, that project was still so significant for us, but it gave us the opportunity to recognize, like, wait, there's actually really something here. And at the time, culturally, there was so much going on in 2017, 2018. We wanted to make sure that we were proposing a different path for brands, because historically brands haven't necessarily had to have a conscience. And we've moved into this space where people do want to understand how a brand is impacting the world, right? And it's front and center. You see it everywhere. And so for us at the time, that was really unique, right? We were one of the only companies talking about being purpose-driven. Now we're we've been the purpose-driven agency of the year 2 years in a row, 2024, 2025. And it's been really powerful to see that transition from where we were when we first started, when we were, trying to convince people that being purpose driven was important, to
Right.
all the way to today when, we're winning awards for it. Those words didn't even exist when we first started working. So
Yeah.
it's been a really beautiful transition to watch, from those early days working with Adidas on things like culture and impact and innovation and purpose, all the way to where we are today.
Yeah. So now clients are coming to you and saying, we need to focus on this. How do we do it? As opposed to you saying, this is what you need to be doing, other than selling a product, right? Other than the bottom line.
Absolutely. Well, because it's bigger than the bottom line, right? I think ultimately we know that markets will expand and contract, but if you're able to build customer loyalty, and if you're able to build community, if you're able to have a higher purpose and vision, and a brand that actually sticks, you can ride through a lot of those waves a lot better than your competitors will be able to.
Yeah. So you're the chief creative officer. That's a really, I would say, high pressure position, because you're the one who's coming up with concepts and ideas, and how can we be creative? Where do you go for inspiration when a client comes to you? Is it something that comes easily to you? Do you immediately see it?
Yeah. So what's funny is when clients come to us, I always get really excited in those first conversations. I can tell if there's something there. I would say there's a couple of things for my own life, for my own personal inspiration. And maybe this was like the part of me that loved building Airbnb, but travel is really important. Understanding other cultures, understanding history, understanding context is really important. I think there's just so much to learn there and so much opportunity. Um, Beyond that, though, my team is incredibly inspiring. And I think part of the thing about being a creative leader is that it's not about you being the best, most creative person in the room all the time. It's actually about you identifying these incredible talent and bringing them together and creating an atmosphere where everyone in the room has the ability to speak up, to have ideas, to give their
Mm.
voice. This was actually something from a leadership perspective that I learned very early on from Scott Bedbury. And I'm really grateful for it, because one of the things he told me was it should never matter, what your station is in a room. Good ideas can come from anywhere. And if you're not a leader that's making an atmosphere where you're going to get ideas from literally anyone in the room, then you're missing out. And so yes, I identify as a creative. Yes, I'm a creative leader, but at the end of the day, it's really about cultivating that space and growing other creatives, and that's what will make Scout Lab successful. It's what will make our clients successful. Is that collective genius of culture and understanding what's out there.
Yeah, so true about recognizing something in someone who works for you to help them grow and get to the next level. That really makes for the best leader.
It's the most rewarding too. That's the thing
Yeah.
I find, as the years go on. One of my absolute favorite things about what I do is getting to work with really brilliant people, but beyond that, getting to watch them grow and watch them cultivate their creativity and their courage and their speaking, all of these elements is absolutely hands down one of the best things about my job.
Yeah. My last question, you mentioned being a mother and having two children. That's typically the most important thing in your life, adjacent to work and career. What do you hope for your children as you're watching them grow and kind of finding, I'm assuming they're young.
They are. I've got two under two. Yeah.
Under two.
Two under
Okay, so
two. Yeah.
they don't have aspirations yet about what they want to be when they grow up. Maybe here's a better question. What do you find the most challenging as a mother and having the concern and worry of these two little humans and running a company?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think that, and I actually, I've talked about this a lot, but I think that there's a unique tension around this idea of balance that exists. And this kind of cultural idea that you should always be seeking balance. And for an entrepreneur and someone that's been so dedicated to their career, like I have, I've kind of adopted a very different perspective, which is it's more about being all in and present in the moment that you're in than it is about always seeking balance. This ebb and flow of understanding that sometimes work is going to be dominating and sometimes, being at home is going to be the most important thing. And that's not always going to feel perfectly balanced is also really important. And I think that if you just seek perfect balance all the time, doing something like being an entrepreneur or building a company, or, in my case, looking at how I can raise children to ultimately become, the highest versions of themselves, right? Because I don't want to subscribe to them who they're going to be, but I want to create an atmosphere to foster whatever is innate in them. But that requires being present, right? So I think that's definitely been the biggest thing, is to overcome that hurdle of that myth of balance that we might have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I agree. And that's great advice. Great way to end the show. Thanks so much for being with me and sharing a little bit about your life story.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so wonderful being here.
Stay with us as we go into our last break, and I'll be back to close out the show. Over on our Women to Watch YouTube channel, we have a partner profile series featuring some of the amazing executive women working at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Our latest installment features Dr. Susan Firth. Here's an excerpt from our latest conversation. The goal, I would say, of CHOP is for every child to have a chance at a healthy future. And how does the Research Institute specifically support and help in that goal?
One of our strategic imperatives as an enterprise is to really promote research-driven precision medicine, so diagnostics and therapeutics that are really tailored to an individual's circumstance. And I always add to that research-driven precision medicine that this has to be research-driven precision medicine for everyone. So we've invested in programs around health equity research methods and making sure that as we are pursuing our research and discovery, that we're thinking about how our questions apply to different populations, whether it's where they live, if they're rural or urban, or what their social determinants of health are. So we're trying to incorporate thinking broadly about improving child health to all populations. So we want to help children who are around the world and also in our backyard.
To learn more about Dr. Susan Firth, head over to our Women to Watch YouTube channel for the full interview.
We are CHOP, and we can't wait to show you around. We're the nation's first children's hospital. Now, a care network with more than 50 locations that continues to expand. 3 state-of-the-art research buildings with 1.5 million square feet of space. We have grown from 12 beds 165 years ago to nearly 600 beds and one of the best children's hospitals in the world. We have a level 1 trauma center, 11 floors of patient units, more than 20 operating rooms, first of its kind delivery unit for babies with birth defects, a separate cardiac operative and catheterization suite, and places to learn, like our internationally recognized simulation center. We have trained generations of leaders in the field of pediatrics. We are world leaders in medicine, surgery, and science. One of the top recipients in NIH funding for pediatric research. In this building, pioneers in CAR T therapy, mitochondrial disease, brain tumors, hyperinsulinism, and other rare diseases. Here, groundbreaking work in fetal surgery, genetics and genomics, and neurology. In our newest building, leaders in social determinants of health, clinical informatics and epidemiology, autism, trauma and injury prevention. Our patients come from every state and 115 countries. Meeting these challenges requires the best and the brightest. We are passionate about pediatrics. We are motivated to make a difference in the world and in our community. We are a team. We are CHOP.
That's it, everyone, for another week of Women to Watch. Thanks for being with me. Next week, I'll be speaking with Leah DeFeo, and Leah is an author and she is a business consultant. Thank you, as always, to our Watch team of corporate partners for all of their great contributions to the show. And congratulations to our Eagles here in Philly. Have a great week, everyone.